Good afternoon, everybody, and a very, very warm welcome to the Stellenbosch Forum lecture of today. Hello, Prof Le Cordeur, nice to see you. It's rather cold in Stellenbosch. I'm looking out on Victoria Street with a lot of rain and cold, so a warm welcome to everybody, and very happy to welcome you here and for you to join us today. I'm just going to do a very brief welcome and introduction to the forum lecture, as well as to Professor Michael le Cordeur, and then I'm going to hand over to Michael to take us through the topic of today. So the Stellenbosch Forum Lecture series was started in 1990 already, so it's been ongoing for a long time. And it provides regular opportunities to staff and students at Stellenbosch University, as well as any interested people from the public, to learn more about the relevant world-class research that's being done at Stellenbosch. Our lecturers are normally requested to present their academic research topics in such a way that it's also understandable to non-experts in the field. And so these lectures therefore provide really an ideal opportunity for critical debate and interesting discussions around topics that cross disciplinary boundaries. Our focus this year is on changing climates, and it's not only in the traditional sense of climate change. We are looking at showcasing influences of changing climates in a variety of areas, including natural resources, health, education, history, economies, etc. And then we try to show how our research can be impactful in finding possible solutions in rapidly changing settings. So we all know that over the past years, there's been a lot of changes in our world, and education is certainly no exception. So today's topic, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about this, especially having children of school-going age, is bridging the gap from an unequal past to a future of equal opportunities in search of an effective curriculum for South Africa. Now, on this topic, I'm sure Professor Michael le Cordeur hardly needs any introduction. I'll briefly highlight some of his bio sketch that you've seen as well. He's currently the Vice Dean of Teaching and Learning in our Faculty of Education and previously the Chair of the Department of Curriculum Studies. He's a full professor, an NRF-rated researcher, a formal language teacher, high school principal, and circuit manager of education. So he holds a doctorate from Stellenbosch University and also qualifications from UWC, University of South Africa, and Stellenbosch University's Graduate Business School. Michael, we're really looking forward to hearing from you today. I'm sure this is going to be a very exciting topic for all in attendance, and we will also record this to make it available afterwards. And everybody must feel free, please, to post some questions along the way in the chat box that I can ask afterwards. Or, of course, we will also give some opportunity for you to raise your hand and ask questions directly to Professor le Cordeur. Kindly just ensure that your cameras and your microphones remain switched off during the lecture. Thank you very much, Prof. le Cordeur. Over to you.
Thank you, and good afternoon to all of you out there. You come to me just as the rain is starting to pouring down here, where I sit at my home down here in Wellington in the Boland. Normally the beautiful Boland, but today it's quite a rainy day, and I'm sure that you will hear the rain somehow in the background. My lecture is a shortened version and an adapted version of what was my inaugural address. And I am going to share my screen with you now. And then I will take it from there, with your permission, of course. So colleagues, coming from a basic education background as a teacher and as a principal and always as a circuit manager, the curriculum has always near to my heart, and the whole of my research career so far was aiming at how can we improve the situations at our schools, and especially our poorer schools. We are often reading pieces in newspapers, and people are always criticizing what's happening at schools. And many of those critique goes to our teachers. Now, having been a teacher myself, I've been married with a teacher, yeah, for as long as I can remember, and together we've been in education now for almost 70 years. So I know that things at our schools are not ideal, and that the situation there is not ideal and conducive for learning. And that is why we constantly need to do research and to seek for solutions as to what we think should be the best possible curriculum for South Africa. And that is my main concern. So far, I think that we haven't been able to find the correct mix that is tailor-made for the South African situation, and that is what I'm looking for. So I will give you a brief background of the situation in our schools today. I will talk to you about CAPS and the shortcomings of CAPS, and then I will give you a future look how I think the curriculum should be looking or should look like in the future. Now, like I am going to move on now to my presentation. Um, it all starts with a well-rooted system. All organizations, and education is no different, nothing different. It all starts with a very good root system. Any organization has many natural enemies, and education, as you all know, are no exception. And all of that can weaken the system from within. It can even destroy the system. And without a healthy root system, there is just no growth, which is where I believe we are at the moment, mainly because of poor planning and poor preparation. And hence, we don't see an environment in our school system that is conducive to growth. And therefore, we need to take steps, and we need to take those steps every single day. I believe that our education system is finding itself in hot water. I believe if I can take the narrative of COVID, that we are in fact in the ICU. We need to ask questions whether the education system and our current curriculum, in fact, has improved the quality of life in our country, as it gives access to all learners. Because if you look at a recent international report published a while ago, there is cause for great concern. Our education system is still very much divided. 20 years, 29 years down the line of democracy, almost 30 years later, uh, schools boasting quality education are few and far in between. Um, and it is these challenges that can weaken the system. And it can, if we are not careful, it can in fact destroy the system. So um, the question is, did the curriculum eradicate the divisions of the past? Quality of education in poor communities is actually shocking. Almost 20,000 of our public schools have no laboratories, and yet we expect our children to pass maths and science. Almost 240 schools have no electricity. So you cannot switch on a computer in those schools. You cannot go onto Teams in those schools. Almost 3,000 schools are still using pit toilets. It's an indictment to the learners and the teachers of those schools. More than 700,000 learners must walk long distances to schools. And I can tell you, as the former circuit manager in Stellenbosch, that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of learners in Stellenbosch who must walk to school more than 5 kilometers coming from the surrounding farms. 10,000 schools have got no sports facilities. And when I see on television that we are absolutely crazy and with all the good right, I'm also a supporter of the Stormers and the Proteas. But when I see these things on television, then I immediately think of those schools who never had sports facilities. And I'm sure there are so much more uh, learners out there who can play for our country eventually if they are only given the opportunity. So many of our schools have got no libraries. So how can you do the CAPS curriculum in a school where there is no libraries? Those learners cannot do their assignments, neither can their parents support them with that. So all in all, the environment in our schools at the moment is not conducive to quality education. Um, some of our schools goes to school in very poor conditions. Many of them are still sitting under the trees, and only 1 in 4 schools have enough books to all the learners. So if you don't have a classroom, if you don't have books, you don't have libraries or computers, and if you don't even have a toilet, and then people still expect you to pass matric, and they expect you that when you come to university, you must be at equal footing with all the other learners, which is absolutely impossible. And so we need to talk about today about education with a purpose. I'm a firm believer of the policies or the theories of Aristotle, who believed that education is much more than just knowledge. He also talks of the attainment of happiness and what is a good morale. Uh, you move between a good intellect versus the goodness of character. And I believe that our current curriculum focuses so much, no, it focuses so much on the acquisition of knowledge that happiness of our learners are neglected. I mean, if you must go to school under the tree, look outside. There are learners outside today who we don't have a classroom. You cannot do your best. And in many cases, the current curriculum only seeks to produce good workers for the state. And William Pennar said, you know, curriculum should be a mechanism to acquire knowledge, yes, but it must also be a strategy to understand your environment. And then we must expect people to respond to that environment by meaningful action. And that means that we must empower our learners so that they too can respond to the nature and to the environment around them. Uh, and the best way of doing that is to qualify and to go and study and to eventually find yourself a job so that you can contribute to the economy of the country. But many learners, they just can't do that. And so my argument is that our curriculum in South Africa is unsuccessful in enabling learners to acquire the knowledge and the skills that are so needed for the 21st century. It also fails to install a good value system within our learners. I'm concerned about the wellness of our teachers. Um, our teachers are working tirelessly to complete this curriculum-driven school out there. But I don't think our employees are looking after the well-being of teachers. Many of them fell ill, many of them need trauma counseling, many of them suffer from burnout, and they are physically and mentally exhausted because on the one hand, they are being pressurized by the parents, on the other side, by the curriculum, learners, and of course, there is the education department who also are putting more and more demands on them uh, every day. And what we see out there in schools is that teacher absenteeism is reaching an all-time high. In fact, my apologies. In fact, the absenteeism of teachers, uh, it was cited by learners as one of the biggest stumbling blocks in our schools out there. So what then is this thing called curriculum? Now, there are many, many definitions, and I've only given you a few on this slide. Pratt say a curriculum is a written document that systematically describes the content, the goals, objectives, learning activities, and the evaluation procedures. William Pennar says it is in its broadest sense, a curriculum refers to all the courses offered at school. It prescribes what topics must be learned and at what level it must be understood. But I'm concerned about the word prescribed. The curriculum is a set of courses and content offered at a school or a university. And the Latin meaning of curriculum refers to the course of deeds, experiences through which learners grow to become mature adults. So all of the above tells you that the curriculum uh, will be all the experiences that any individual has in their course of living. In if one bear in mind that learning today is also regarded as a lifelong experience. You can't just say that I've been to school and now I'm okay. Uh, Education is a constant learning process and it will never stop. Let's look at the Constitution. In its preamble, the Constitution states that the aim of our Constitution is to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. It says that it wants to improve the quality of life of all citizens and free the potential of each and every person. It wants to lay down the foundations for a democratic society where government is based on the will of the people and where every citizen is equally protected by law. Yes, our Constitution wants to build a united democratic South Africa able to take its rightful place in the family of nations. The question is, where are we today, almost 30 years after democracy? One only need to look around us here in Stellenbosch, look around to the suburbs in Stellenbosch, and then ask ourselves, is every citizen in this country given a fair chance and a fair opportunity? The state's position is clear. The state agreed that the curriculum should be a strategy that will allow us to move from our bedeviled past to a future established on democratic principles. Aristotle refers to it as the goodness of character, to improve the quality of life of everyone, also those living in Kayamandi. And the instrument that the state has installed to achieve this goal is called the Curriculum Assessment Policy Statement, and I'm going to refer to it in this lecture as CAPS. So this National Curriculum Assessment Policy is a single comprehensive document which we accepted in January 2012, and it has replaced all previous curricula in South Africa. It aims to promote knowledge in local context, yes, on the one side, but also being sensitive to the global imperatives on the other side. My question this afternoon is, how successful was this CAPS curriculum over the past 10 years, for instance, since 2012, to enable learners to acquire and to apply the knowledge that they need to give purpose to their lives? And talking about purpose, the CAPS aims to equip learners, irrespective of their social background, their race, gender, their abilities, or their intellectual abilities, with the knowledge, the skills, and the values that they need for self-fulfillment and meaningful participation in a society. Like I said, they must participate, make a economic contribution. The curriculum aims to provide access to a higher education, and it wants to facilitate the transition of our learners from education institutions such as schools to the workplace, and providing employers with a sufficient proof of a learner's competencies. Please note on the emphasis on the readiness for the workplace and the satisfying of employers, underlining my point earlier that the curriculum in its current form only seeks to produce good workers to the state. And the principles are there, it is very clear. It is based on social transformation, ensuring the redress of the imbalances of the past. It wants to encourage active and a critical approach to learning. It's based on high knowledge and high skills. And the context of each grade shows progression. In other words, it spells out how do you move from point A to point B. It is based on human rights, inclusivity, environmental. Yes, it's also sensitive to the environmental issues. And we've talked about climate change, and this series of lectures is based on climate change in more than one sense of the word. It's also based on social justice, diversity, poverty. We take into account poverty and equality. All these issues must be taken into account. Also, it values indigenous knowledge systems. And I'm not sure that we're paying enough attention to indigenous knowledge within our current curriculum. We see a constant struggle. For instance, how do we accommodate our Muslim students during, say, for instance, the month of Ramadan, and mainly because we don't teach indigenous knowledge systems in our schools, let alone at university. The curriculum is based on because it also acknowledges the history and the heritage of our country. Our question is, are we doing enough of that? Are we really paying attention to the heritage of our country when it comes to our current curriculum? And then the last thing that we need to mention here is that the curriculum must be credible, it must also be efficient, and it must be comparable with other countries in the world. So one cannot fault the state on its principles, especially as it places a high priority on South Africa as a diverse country and a nation, and that the curriculum must be a means to rectify the mistakes of our divided past. So in its very nature, the CAPS curriculum aims to produce learners who will be able to solve problems, to work effectively as an individual, but also as a member of a team. And I want to emphasize, as a member of a team. Learners who can organize and manage themselves effectively. They must be able to collect, to analyze, to organize, but also to evaluate critically. They must be able to communicate with languages, but also visual and with symbolic skills. They must be able to use science and technology, and they must be responsible to the environment and also responsible to their own health and the health of others. I don't have to tell you about the effects of COVID. And then lastly, learners must be taught to be inclusive. And I think for the past few weeks here at Stellenbosch University, we have learned quite a few lessons about inclusivity. It must become part of the planning and the teaching of each and every school. And so the question is, has CAPS made any improvements in when we talk about all the aims that it set out to do? Let us compare ourselves for a moment with other developing countries. And let us take our achievement in literacy and compare ourselves with other countries. And here I'm talking about Egypt, Morocco, Kuwait, Iran, and then also one of the European countries. And you will see that we are lagging behind. So how do we compare with other countries? If you want to answer this question, let us look at the level of our literacy and compare that with the rest of the world. Now, the test of the progress in international reading literature study, normally refers to as the PEARLS assessments, showed that South Africa was the lowest performing country out of 50 countries. Our learners in foundation phase struggle to formulate answers and to comprehend questions. It is not better in the intermediate phase either. Only 1 in 5 intermediate phase learners in grade 4 can read with comprehension. So yes, they can read mechanically, but they don't understand what they're reading. And so the third international mathematics and science study confirms we do have a major literacy crisis in our country. The question is, so what do we do about it? And where do one start? One of my master's students graduated in March of this year with a thesis on the absence of a reading culture in our schools. The pandemic confirmed the great inequalities in our education system. Teachers had to switch to online tuition almost overnight. But unfortunately, only a very small group could continue with their online classes because the majority of our schools, for them, it was just impossible. Uh, if you think about social distancing, you think about crowded schools and even overcrowded schools, it was just not possible. So learners had to rotate. And here we're talking about foundation phase learners who have to be in school every day if we want to teach them how to read and learn efficiently. And the result is that today we are sitting with a group of learners in grade 2 and 3 and even in grade 4 who can hardly read or write. They are basically illiterate. And so we need to make adjustments to our curriculum. It will require urgent action from the part of the whole teaching fraternity. We need a fundamental mind shift in our reading culture at schools. And from the point of view of a curriculum point of view, it is evident for me, at least, that reading must become an integral part of school and not just in the foundation phase. Reading is a skill, and like any other skill, say, think for instance, playing rugby, playing cricket. You can't just say, I've learned to play rugby in the foundation phase, so now I'm okay for the rest of my life. It's a skill set that need to be practiced over and over, year in and year out. And we are not doing that with reading. If you look at what happened at the other spectrum of the school curriculum in matric, we've seen now what is the case, in the foundation phase. If you look at matric, then you see that because of COVID, and my apologies that this is in Afrikaans, but when you look at this, you will see that the matric pass rate has gone down in just about in all of the provinces. And if you take those provinces where people and where there are huge distances between the various towns and the district offices, like the Northwest and the Northern Cape, you will see that the matric pass rate there has gone down enormously, even with 10% or more. So we've learned quite a lot from our matric results. But I'm only going to focus on 4 aspects. For me, there's a marked difference in the impact of the pandemic on private schools versus state schools. It's very clear that money speaks. And the impact of the pandemic on the results of government schools are even more severe. And it all depends on what school you are attending. For instance, if you attend a formal C school or a private school, you will have access to more resources. And many of the other schools are only struggling just to survive. It's clear to me that mother tongue education has a huge impact on the performance of learners. Those with Afrikaans and English as their home language, they are outperforming all the other learners. And it's very clear that mother tongue education, whether you are Afrikaans or whether you are English speaking, if you can go to school in the language that is your mother tongue, they are doing the best. And then finally, poverty still plays a huge role in our schools. The top 7 districts were all in or around the big cities of Tshwane, Johannesburg, and Cape Town. And so today we need to ask ourselves, are we creating, or are we actually going towards another lost generation? In this cartoon by the late Mouton, he points out that how learners struggle for 12 years to reach matric, just to fall over the edge and to become part of the ever-growing statistics of the unemployed. It is clear to me that these young people need more support to bridge the gap from the school to the world of work, or then from school to university. Youth unemployment is the direct result of an education system, in my opinion, which failed our youth. Karen Moore said last year the following. She said, "We have normalized being broken in South Africa. We aim to survive. We don't aim to flourish. And those words is like a ticking time bomb, because the unemployment of our youth has been a problem for a very, very long time now. If you look at the situation, you will see that 2 out of 3 young people between 15 and 24, they are either unemployed or not in school or not studying. Now, that is about 64% of the population under 25 years. And that number, I'm sure, will increase because of COVID. A large number of them fall out before they reach grade 12. In fact, numbers that we've seen recently says that the current dropout rate is the highest ever for the last 20 years. So this rate of dropping out, it is increasing year by year. Last year, it was about 750,000 learners dropping out before they get to matric. And so most of these learners eventually find themselves on the street. They advertise themselves as a plumber, as a welder, as a painter. Now, those are skills that they don't get at school. So you begin to wonder, where do they get those skills to call themselves a plumber or a tiler or a paver, as you can see there in the photograph. So for me, the emphasis on academic results, knowledge for the sake of knowledge, was done at the cost of practical skills, which could have helped many people to take, as Pinar has called it, take action in finding a job. I think this large number of unemployed young people, it's cause for huge concern. For me, it's a social catastrophe. It's a ticking time bomb. A time bomb that has exploded in July of 2021, when thousands of people, and many of them of school-going age, participated in the looting of shops and the damaging of property. If you have matric, but you cannot get a job for years and years, and you go hungry every day, then it's not difficult to join those who are trying to save their family in their quest for survival. What is even more upsetting is that many, many schools in KZN were vandalized. Stoves and fridges were stolen from their feeding schemes. So not only do we have an educational problem, a literacy problem, we also have a moral problem in this country. Clearly, a value system built on democratic principles is lacking. If people are, have to steal, have to loot, just to survive. And this is in sharp contrast with what we now are saying, that the curriculum should be a strategy for self-studying, enabling yourself to understand your environment and then to improve on that. And you do it by taking positive action. To steal is not positive action. That is something like entrepreneurship or agriculture. But looting and stealing, I think, it shows that people are devastated, but they're taking the wrong action in order for them to just survive. And the disturbing message is that many South Africans no longer see education or the matric certificate as a means to improve their lives. Listen to what this woman has to say.
In the school system, they don't want us to work.
The school system, Let me rephrase or reiterate. The school system is criminal in that it kills a child's spirit. This is a devastating message to all of us who are involved in education, because we're not producing thinkers. And, we live in a world where facts is no longer important, where what is important is that learners must be taught to think for themselves. Too much coaching and not enough critical thinking is not going to help our learners. We will reach a point where preparations for exams will become less and less important. I have reached a stage, where I have said to my students, and they wanted to know from me, what was their study for exam? And I said to them, you have studied for the whole year so far, so you are already prepared for the exam. You've got nothing to study. If you've been in class and if you have paid attention, there's nothing to study. And people need to adapt the new form of education. It's a mindset that people they must change the whole mindset about promoting critical thinking, doing active learning, and what are the skills, for the fourth industrial revolution. So what does all of that, you've listened to that woman, what does all of that say about CAPS? In my own research, I've done this a year or two ago with one of my master's students, Neen Schultz. We came to the conclusion that CAPS is just too content heavy, which resulted in many challenges, mainly the lack of comprehension. There is just no time for consolidation or remediation. We can't do without the unnecessary detail because we must focus more on literacy and numeracy. Important. Textbooks are not compatible with the curriculum. Learners struggle to identify with the themes in the textbooks, let alone struggle to identify with the language in the class. If you have learners coming from the Cape Flats and they speak Kaapse Afrikaans, and they get to a class and they only hear standard Afrikaans the whole day, then they also will not understand their textbooks. It's just not compatible. CAPS is too prescriptive. It tells you do this and do that. And there's no time for teachers to slow down, for teachers to say, listen, let us rethink about this. Let us reflect. Let us recap. There's no such time. Learners are over-assessed. It is the one assignment after the other. It's the one test after the other, and exams and exams and exams. In Finland, learners only write one exam, their final matric exam. If you have so many assessments, then there is not enough time to master the knowledge. And for me, it's very clear that CAPS can only work in a school where we have trained teachers with small classes and with libraries. For the most of our schools, CAPS can just not function, because CAPS is killing a teacher's passion. This is an educational psychologist saying, I'm tired of parents phoning me in tears about their child's progress. I'm tired of hearing of children as young as 7 diagnosed with anxiety and stress-related disorders. I am tired of parents sending their children to me for scholastic assessments when there is actually nothing wrong with that child. So what have we learned? We've learned that we need to focus more on health education. We've learned that technology is here to stay. And we've learned that the government cannot do everything for everybody. There's just not enough funding. Schools must start doing things themselves. Entrepreneurship and agriculture must have an important space in our school curriculum. We need to see gardens on the empty spaces on our school grounds so that learners can begin to understand that for food security, it all starts with the curriculum. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the dream of a united democratic South Africa still eludes us. We've come from a divided past, and the new political dispensation was supposed to rectify all these mistakes. But the fact of the matter is that 75% of our schools, the quality of education is not so But it will open doors to any kind of work, let alone to any kind of tertiary education. Similar countries, similar to ours, achieved much more success with less money. And more people are turning to what they call the survival mode, as we are failing to provide a platform for economic growth. In fact, Moody's have moved us down to junk status. We are faced by huge economic challenges such as Eskom and load shedding, and our inability to combat crime and corruption, and our lack of service delivery and the poverty create a somber atmosphere in our country, which has become a country divided. Once again, we are a country divided. And so there will have to come significant changes in the future. According to the World Economic Forum, there won't be a shortage of jobs in the future, but if we don't take the right steps, there might be a shortage of skilled talent to fill those jobs. Working from home will become the norm, and it will provide people the geographic freedom to live wherever they want. The majority of the workforce will freelance by 2027. And the technological changes will keep on increasing. And we all have to learn new skills in our ongoing quest throughout the life. So what jobs? The following jobs are likely to lose face in the future, are likely to decrease over the next 5 years. And I'm not going to mention all of them, but you can see there for yourselves. Data clerks, executive secretaries, payroll clerks, accountants, bookkeepers, factory workers, operation managers, because people will begin to manage themselves, supermarket cashiers, bank tellers will disappear because more and more people will go to autobanks. And so we need to take these into account if we are going to think of a new curriculum. If you look at what jobs will be in demand after 2022, you'll see things like, guess what? Nurses and medical professionals. I think COVID has opened up our eyes for many things. Software developers, data analysts, cybersecurity experts will be extremely important. But we also see there elementary teachers. We will still need teachers to teach learners to read and to write. We will still need plumbers, and we will still need electricians. And when we put together a new curriculum, we will have to think of all of these as we're moving forward. We can think of a new curriculum, yes, but before we begin to think of a curriculum, maybe we must first think of what skills do we need in our quest going forward. For me, it's important that learners and students must be taught, values and issues about emotional intelligence. If you're going to work from home with no line manager to check on you, it will require self-discipline. Critical thinking will become important. We need leadership in this country. I don't have to tell you that. In our country, we are lacking leadership big time. Learners must be taught to solve problems. And of course, we must teach our learners that they must create work rather than look for work. If you ask me today, what are the biggest challenges in South Africa? I have listed 7 there for you. And at the same time, I have given what I think should be changed in our curriculum. The challenges with Eskom requires renewable energy. Our challenges with corruption in this country demands of us to perhaps to teach moral values. We are suffering from racism. Maybe we should have another look at the real South African history. Unemployment, and maybe it's because we don't teach entrepreneurship. Climate change will become important, and so will be environmental studies. We are living in a time of food insecurity, and we need to pay more attention, therefore, to agricultural studies. And of course, people need houses and transport. And so we do need engineers to look after those. So a curriculum for 2022 and beyond, I have discussed this with you, so I'm not going to go through it all again, but I have mentioned the concerns and the challenges and what I think should be the subjects that we should include in a future curriculum. I want to conclude, ladies and gentlemen. If you ask me a 10-point plan for a curriculum going forward, here are 10 points from my side. 1, appoint the right people with the right skills. Get rid of lazy teachers and incompetent school leaders. 2, focus on apprenticeships. Yes, we need doctors and engineers, but we also need the artisans to build the hospitals and the bridges. Train and appoint more teachers to minimize class sizes to 30 or even less. Build more schools, and please, schools with running water and functioning toilets. Appoint experienced teachers to revise the CAPS curriculum. The current curriculum is just not working for South Africa. More attention to learners with learning problems, because this adds largely to the huge dropout rate and the disciplinary problems. Reduce the overwhelming administrative work of teachers. Teachers must teach in class, not in an office. Preschool must become a prerequisite before you admit learners to grade 1, and focus on literacy in all our grades. Excellence is not a single deed, it was said by Aristotle. It's a way of life. So if we want to change our situation, we need to change the way we teach. We need to change our educational life. My final word. Recently I drove to Ashton to see how 8,000 tons of steel and concrete was converted to an ultra-modern bridge by the side of the road. And then with technology, the completed bridge was moved into its real site within 6 hours, providing a safe and effective access over the Kaufmanskloof River. Indeed, an engineering marvel. And it filled me with hope for the future, for our country. If we know what the problem is, we can solve it. If the right people with the right skills are employed, then, colleagues, success is guaranteed. I thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Professor le Cordeur, also for your excellent time management. We have about 12 minutes left for any questions from our audience. And I see there's a long one coming up in the chat box. So I will read that quickly. To start off, let me just first go to one of the hands in the audience. Professor Blaine, you can go ahead, please.
Hi, Professor le Cordeur. It was heartbreaking, your presentation, and but I'm really glad that you are having this difficult and heartbreaking conversation, because already, I think 7 years ago, I was at a meeting for the Department of Basic Education where they were asking, I'm in the Faculty of Engineering, and they were asking the Faculty of Engineering people from across the country, what can they do to bring the fourth industrial revolution into the classroom? And across the board, after they gave those pearls feedback of the literacy, then everybody was saying there's no point in focusing on technical skills that require you to be able to read and to understand if you can't read and understand. So I think my question is, I know you gave your 10 points at the end of what we need to do, but what I am seeing now already, and I think it is going to get worse after COVID, is that our first year students, the knock-on effect when we get into our university classrooms, what can we do to help these first year students to not fall through the cracks? I mean, I think your focus is more on the general population, but we do have these few people who hopefully will be the new leaders of our country, and to deliver us from this horrible scenario. But they also don't understand when they read the exams questions. They don't understand. They can't interpret what they're reading in textbooks and so on, and they're at university.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Blaine. It's a very important question. And we at the education faculty, and I see some of my education faculty colleagues are in the audience, we require from our students to do a module in what we call academic literacy. And I think like I said, we must focus on literacy in all sectors of the curriculum, in all sectors of the school going, or then in this case tertiary education. And maybe there's a place there that we do a module in academic literacy in all our faculties, because we must also accept the fact, Professor Blaine, that some of our students, we come from different backgrounds. We cannot deny that. I've explained where we're coming from. And because we're coming from different backgrounds, not all of our students are on the same page. And we must mitigate that difference. And the best way I can think of is that we do have people who can teach academic literacy, and maybe we should make use of that. That for me, for now, would be my first resort to go to. Thank you.
Thanks. I think I must speak to you further, because I really think that it is a crisis in engineering with our first years. If you look at how they are answering questions, that they don't understand the question. And as an engineer, we don't know how to teach academic literacy, so we need some help in structuring programs that can support our students.
Yeah, no, sure. I'm sure myself and some of my colleagues, we would be more than happy to work together. And if a while ago we all attended this conference, they called the renewal program for Stellenbosch. And I think one of the things that came out of that conference was that we said we must work in collaboration.
Yes.
All over the campus, education and engineering must work together. We must not work in silos anymore, but there are more than enough space for us to work together. And I think we should try and begin to do just doing that. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. It's also very nice to see that faculties reach out to each other across the faculty boundaries through this lecture series.
Yeah.
So there's another question, Professor le Cordeur, from Clarissa Robertson. She says, I note you mentioned a return to focusing on literacy and numeracy and focus on apprenticeships and artisan skills. In your opinion, do you think we did ourselves a disservice by removing the more practical and creative subjects or activities like artisan workshops, or have we moved beyond that?
I think so. Yes, I do think so. I think we've painted ourselves in a corner there. Sorry for that. I think we painted ourselves in a corner, because what we know today is that we need both. We must be illiterate. We must be able to read. We must be able to write. But we also need people. Like I said, yes, we need the doctors, but we also need the people who can build the new hospitals. And my brother, he is still an artisan, and whenever I need something that has gone wrong in my home, I will pick up the phone and I will call him, because he can just do about anything. And we need more of those people in society. If you look at my presentation, you would see that one of two other jobs that is almost secure for the future will be plumbers and electricians. Believe me, each and every one of us, there will come a time, or there has come a time, when you will pick up the phone and you will call a plumber, and we will need them. Yes, we will need them.
Thank you very much, Prof. I think one only needs to have a broken tap in your home to realize how far an purely academic qualification brings you.
Yeah.
Just a question from my side. I was recently very, very inspired in listening to one of our young chemistry lecturers, Professor Rihanna Malgasinus. She does a lot of school outreach work, and she actually brings both pupils and teachers into her chemistry labs to train them and to give access to, she even designs kits that they can use for practicals. So what more can we do as a university, in your opinion, to help the situation?
Yeah, if we can produce more Rihanna Malchasa, it will be very nice. I know her personally. I've been working with her. I know exactly what she is doing for the learners of Mitchell's Plain. I belong to an organization that is called the Stichting vir die Bemagtiging deur Afrikaans, and she is part of that program. And she, for those who don't know, every single Saturday, she is busy in her lab trying, explaining to learners of Mitchell's Plain and to all the learners who don't have access to laboratories. You would have seen in my lecture, my presentation, that I've mentioned how many schools of us do not have a laboratory at school, and yet they expect our learners to do science and maths. And she is filling that gap. And she's doing absolutely wonderful work, which I so admire what she is doing. But we just need to double up, Dr. Tron. We just need to double up on those kind of interactions and those kind of community services that we are doing. And we, as Stellenbosch University, we are doing a lot of things, and for which we are very, very grateful. But we cannot do more. We cannot do enough. We can still do more. And yes, like I said, we need to double up on those nice projects that people like Dr. Malchas is doing on a continuous basis. Well done to her.
Yeah, I think it takes exceptional time and sacrifice also from our university lecturers to get involved in these activities. So I think what we also probably need to speak about is how does one then get acknowledged in a world that not always acknowledges these kind of outreach activities sufficiently. So yeah, I was thoroughly inspired by that. I don't see, I see some comments in the chat box, but I don't see other questions. Just appreciation also for your presentation. Okay, I see there's another hand. Thank you very much. There is Seymour Isaac Bothman. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Tron. Professor Michael le Cordeur, thank you for the opportunity, and I've listened to your presentation, very insightful. But I've got one comment, and I think in 2019, Professor Wilmot, in an inaugural address, she mentioned that there's a need for the school curriculum, like subjects like mathematics and science. There's a need for synchronization, and that is important in terms of the universities, which are offering this to student teachers. And I'm not knowledgeable up to now how far that process is. So if you have students from University of Johannesburg and students from the University of Stellenbosch, you have different curricula for those teachers, and they are entering the space of teaching. And they normally don't, not all teachers or student teachers are going into teaching in the specific province that they were in terms of the student teacher training profession. And then lastly, I think we will not be able to eradicate the ills in education if we don't have a holistic approach in terms of the economic and social welfare of our society. If we do not have political stability and economic stability, we will have it difficult to redress and redress the ills in terms of education. So we need our holistic approach, looking at what we need to do.
Yeah, if I can comment on what has been said there by Seymour. If I'm not mistaken, Seymour, you are in the Gauteng area, and I last saw that you are with the University of South Africa. You see, this is a very difficult question, Dr. Bothman. because universities normally takes pride in their own curricula and in their own research. But I think there is value in your point that we need to collaborate more on a more, on a wider basis. We need to talk more, and most of this will occur during our national conferences, because I'm aware of the fact that these kind of issues are coming up at national conference and people do discuss it there. But I also take your point, and it is a valuable point, Simon. I take your point that we need to engage more, because if there is if the differences between what has been taught at various universities are perhaps too big, then we need to ask ourselves what kind of maths will eventually be taught in our schools. But I think the solution is lies for me once again in the fact that we need to collaborate not only over faculties, but we must also collaborate over various universities, and we must create that spaces where we can meet each other and when we can talk each other. I'm part of such a project. In fact, tonight at 7 o'clock, I will be talking to my colleagues from other universities, and then we will discuss my subject, but I will have the input from various universities, and I think we must do more of those kind of things. But thank you for your point. It's a very good and a very valuable point that you're making.
Thank you very much, Professor le Cordeur. Colleagues, this brings us to the end of our Stellenbosch Forum lecture today. Professor le Cordeur, we know that this also takes an immense time in terms of preparation and also the presentation from your side. So thank you very much again from the Division for Research Development for your willingness to give the lecture today. It was really thought-provoking and really leave us with a lot to think about and to work with and towards in the future. So thank you for also giving us some hope at the end. There's some points that we need to think about of how to improve things. I also want to thank each and every one of you who attended today. It shows an immense interest in this topic, and I think if we all stand together, hopefully we can address all the challenges and take us forward in this regard. So thank you very much. Please keep an eye on the next in our series of Stellenbosch University Forum lectures, and we look forward to seeing you back here.